What's up guys, welcome back to Reasonable Christianity. I know it's been a while since I made a video. Now in today's video, I actually want to delve into something I discussed a few months ago now, maybe a month ago or so. And I was responding to a video that Penuel the Black Pen made on YouTube where he was actually explaining why he's not a Christian. And so I thought it would be good for us to go into some of the clips or some of the reasons he put forth about why he's not a Christian. And the first reason, which I think is probably one of the most significant reasons, is his moral objection to the character of God. And so the question I want to pose to you guys in this particular video, we're going to look at Penuel in a moment. The question I want to pose to you guys is, if God is so evil, by what standard are we judging God? How are we determining whether God is actually good or evil? Because what Penuel does, and I actually want to thank him for articulating his position so clearly and so honestly, because often people don't either take the time to consider their own position and their own objections, or they just don't know why they are really objecting. They present their argument as an intellectual argument when it's actually a emotional or a moral argument. So Penuel just says flat out that he doesn't like the Christian God. And so today I want to show why that particular objection is doing more philosophical work than maybe he and maybe most of our listeners might realize. So with that being said, let me play the clip from Penuel and let's see what he has to say.
The God of Lucifer, the God of Satan, where when things go wrong in his so-called creation, there is no accountability. I'm not aware of any Christian, I'm not aware of any religious leader, I'm not aware of scriptures in the Bible where God takes accountability for creating human beings and other creations that were flawed, to a point where he would flood the world, to a point where people would worship idols, to a point where there's incest and prostitution, to a point where he's even got a wager, gambling with Satan over a man's life, Job. A successful man, a God-fearing man, a man who was rooted in his faith, who'd become wealthy materially. And Satan was like, I bet I can change that guy. God was like, how much you got, my friend? How much you got? A wage over a man's life, suffering. And this is meant to be an inspiring story of Job's faith was so strong that no matter what Satan threw at him, the loss of his wealth, the loss of his family, his being ill, he remained. I'm like, what type of God would this be? What type of father would do that, to say, do whatever you can to my child? Watch, I'll show you.
Now, this is actually a very powerful objection. And so I think we need to take some time to actually name what's happening in this objection. Like I mentioned in the opening, the introduction, this is an emotional objection more than an intellectual objection. This is a moral objection. And what we notice with Penuel here is that he's actually comparing the Christian God to something. He is appealing to some kind of standard, a standard of good, a standard of justice. And he's saying that whether he's not actually saying it, but he's implying that when he looks at the character, the actions, the values described or confined in the Christian God, that God falls short of this kind of standard that he has within him. And I'm sure that if you would ask Penuel, he would say that this standard that he's imposing on the Christian God isn't his preference. No, he's actually saying that God is violating something very real. And so, again, this is a moral objection. It's not an intellectual one. And so most Christians don't really know how to respond to this objection. I was speaking to my wife and my cousin yesterday. Oftentimes when we encounter someone who rejects Christianity, we think that the objection is intellectual. They are rejecting the arguments for the existence of God or the arguments for the resurrection of Christ. While what I've learned is over the years is that no, most of the time the objection is emotional. They've been hurt by someone. They maybe attended a church where they were abused. They saw real suffering in their lives or in the lives of people they love, and so that puts them off from becoming a Christian. And so we reach for evidence, we reach for arguments, but the evidence is rarely the issue. But now we need to ask this question of Penuel and anyone who actually tries to weigh the character of God, or even tries to make a pronouncement or a judgment regarding good and evil. We need to ask him the question, where does the standard come from that he is using to evaluate the character of God? Where is he getting that standard from? Because there's only a few options. There is firstly preference, and if it's only preference, then it's as simple and as insignificant as choosing between vanilla or chocolate when it comes to your favorite ice cream. If morality is social construction, for example, then morality shifts when the majority shifts. Then we have no right to tell another country, for example, that what they are doing is wrong. But we do have international courts that judge and adjudicate human rights violations. How can we do that if morality is a social construction? Then every society has their own construction of morality. That's the second option. The third option is no, morality is only evolutionary. So it's something that developed to help us to flourish or to help us as human beings survive. But if it's only survival behavior, then it's useful, but it's not binding. You can't tell me I have to do it. You can't tell me I ought to do it. You can tell me, look, you should probably do this. Honor your father and your mother. This is a good idea for you to prosper. You can't expect me to do that. You can't expect me not to steal. Because it's a useful trait, which means I can choose whether to engage in it or not. Then the fourth option is that morality is self-authored. But if morality is self-authored, meaning I define my own morality, then morality is mine alone. I can't impose my morality on someone else. And this is what we find in our culture today with things like woke ideologies or LGBTQ ideologies. This idea that everyone has their truth, their morality, and as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's, then you can't tell me what to do. But that presents another problem because we live in countries that have laws. And those laws are an expression of someone's morality. And in order for a country to function, for people to live civilly with one another, we need those laws. So we need a common morality. But what is the standard for that morality? And I ask this question because I know, for example, because I watch Penuel a lot, he has a problem. He thinks oppression is wrong, and I share that with him. I agree with him. He thinks that colonial violence was wrong, that apartheid was wrong, that, for example, the murder of children is wrong. He believes those things are objectively evil. He doesn't believe that it's just his preference or his opinion that those things are wrong. He believes them sincerely because he thinks they are objective truths. And so when we listen to this video, he speaks of it. He speaks of these things with real moral fire. And obviously I agree with him, but that agreement must have a foundation. And my contention is, as a Christian, that the fact that we can agree that certain things are wrong and certain things are right, the foundation of that agreement is the Christian God. So C.S. Lewis puts it like this. He says in Mere Christianity, he says, a man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of what a straight line is, or unless he has some idea of a straight line. So to call God evil is to compare God to a standard, is to call God crooked. You can only call God crooked if you have some idea of a straight line, some idea of right, because standards don't float. It must rest on something. And so what I'm claiming in this video isn't that apart from the Christian God, you can have no moral people. No, I'm not claiming that. You can have moral people. Even atheists, people from different religions, they can be moral people. I've seen it. I've experienced it. So have you. Some atheists might even be more moral than some people claiming to be Christians. So you don't need to believe in God to know that murder, for example, is wrong. No, the claim I'm making in this video is more philosophical. It's that moral knowledge is real and moral claims are binding. And that requires a foundation. And that foundation, we argue as Christians, is the Christian God. That foundation, the moral foundation of right and wrong, is found in the character and nature of God.